What's up, everybody? This is Tom Danielson, and this is a process with Cinch Cycling. I am here again with Zach Morris of Pro Tour Cycling. We are going to discuss the 2020 Dauphiné Libéré, big race, big Tour de France preview warm-up race, but this year coming only 2 weeks before the Tour. Zach, how are you doing? Pumped to have you on the show again.
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. The Dauphiné was a really exciting race, and we've got tons to talk about. We saw a lot of cinchness in the race, and a lot of uh, a lot of amazing high level competition. And it's going to be great to unpack that here on this podcast and see what we come up with. How are you doing, T man?
I'm good. I just finished a ride. Just got back from the first motocross national of the series this year. So I coach one of the top riders, Justin Barsha, and I was just out in Tennessee at the first race. So it was cool to watch some racing. It's cool that there's racing happening in cycling and motocross and all across the, you know, uh, different types of sports, and so I'm pretty motivated. I'm excited. I've seen some racing up close. I've watched the Dauphiné, went for a bike ride today, so I'm ready to talk about some racing and some strategy. So let's kind of run the format like we did last time, where Zach, you kind of take the lead since you've been really following pro cycling right now with your website and everything you do. So why don't you take the lead, and I'll help walk everybody through what happened in the 5 stages of the Dauphiné.
Yeah, so kicking it off with stage one, right? We in the podcast we did, we kind of discussed that Jumbo Visma might not, race this one all out. They might take it on the back burner. But stage one was really interesting because there were, one, two, three categorized climbs on the course, or sorry, more than three. So one, two, three, four, five, six categorized climbs running into the finish. And we actually saw Jumbo Visma almost flexing on everybody there because they were pretty confident that they were going to win that stage, and they ended up doing it with Wout van Aert, who said he was super tired coming into it. But you actually pointed out, yeah, I think you were the only person who called out, Primoz Roglic for sitting up, kind of letting the GC go on stage one, which you kind of mentioned that he might not be taking the GC as seriously in this. So, what did you think about that high level performance we saw on stage one, where Primoz really set Wout up for that win?
Yeah, I think going into the race, coming off Tour de Land with such a dominant victory, Jumbo Visma really had all eyes on them. And then, previous to that race, Loctane, Ineos crushed that race. So those are really kind of the two teams everyone had their eyes on. And this first stage, Jumbo Visma sort of took the bull by the horns and took the reins in the final, and did a fantastic lead out for Wout. What was really unique about that was how Roglic really contributed to that victory. And since we talk all the time about how in sprinting and in explosive puncher type riding, like we saw up a short climb, that initial acceleration is everything. That snap, how the gear choice that you have, the torque that you put on the pedals, the body position, the body technique you put into the bike, and really the zone that you initiate that first part of that attack is so critical. So seeing what happened here, where Roglic really set up a beautiful, sit up, as we used to call it, or we call it, right, where he positioned himself on the wheel of Wout van Aert, and this forced all the other GC riders to position behind Roglic. So in the Dauphiné field, predominantly it was climbers and GC riders in that field. The course was so hard. So there were just a few sort of solo punchers, and really no sprinters. So we had Impey in there, we had Alaphilippe, we had a few kind of basic puncher, some of the best in the world punchers with Valverde. But because Roglic positioned himself on the wheel of Van Aert, the GC riders thought that he was making a move for GC, maybe having his team on the front. And you could arguably say, after seeing like him almost win the first stage of Tour de Land on a less hard finishing climb, that he could have won the stage. And I think he probably could have won the stage if they kept the lineup they were doing. But what was cool was it was kind of a left. It was a downhill into the last, 500, 300, 250 meters. Right at that 250 meters to go, the road kicked up and it kind of bended a little bit off to the left. What they did is they had Dumoulin on the front. He took it all the way into the first part of the climb, started sprinting the climb, and then right as Wout jumped, like we're talking about, put all the torque on the pedals, right cadence, right gear, Roglic, who is the only rider on his wheel, sat up. And when he sat up, it forced a gap immediately between all the other riders. And we saw Kiyokowski and some of the other riders kind of give him the stink eye as they were like, hey, what the F, like we thought you were going to go for it. Now you just got in our way. There's a gap. So, we saw Impey who had to cut because all the GC riders and their teams positioned in front of him. He had to come around like 7 or 8 riders. By the time he got to the back wheel of Van Aert, the gap was already there. He got there, but the finish line came right as he got to the line. So, really awesome strategy by Jumbo Visma right in the first stage. And it really kind of set the tone, I think, for the race, where they're saying, hey, we're more interested in team dynamics and communication than anything in this Dauphiné. So it's cool to see that straight off the bat and see, arguably the best rider in the world right now just sit up and risk losing time on GC to help his teammate win. So it was cool. Put the yellow on Wout Van Aert, and he didn't end up losing any time, just a time bonus to Bernal, who ended up third. So pretty cool.
Pretty big show of confidence on Roglic's behalf. He wasn't scared about that time bonus, and I feel like he knew he was going to be able to take time back on Egan. What's interesting about Wout's sprinting style is he's really brought some of that cyclocross technique over to the road, where he keeps his bike so straight and just has this direct force of power that seems to just be propelling him forward at a phenomenal rate. What do you think about that? I mean, you were a mountain biker. How much do you think his technique a big advantage in these style finishes? Is he distributing his weight differently? Do you think there's anything there on the technique side that's given him a big advantage?
Yeah, absolutely. When I came, I'm crossed over from mountain biking, and Sepp Kuss, who we'll talk about later in the show, also came from mountain biking. A lot of the top riders now have come from BMX or mountain biking. It really, really benefits you a lot to be able to understand weight distribution and traction and center of gravity. So a lot of things that people don't even talk about on the road are massive advantages on the road. In this case, a rider like Wout, who, cyclocross is a super explosive sport, except for they're in the mud, and they have to take these watts and translate them directly to the mud, right into the dirt. And so, we talked about motocross in the first part of this podcast, or I was just saying I'm involved in that sport. In that sport, these bikes have too much power, and the rider's technique and timing, shifting, and RPMs are what helps them go faster. So they manage it. It's not full gas on the throttle and be the fastest rider. There's really a lot of technique. So in cyclocross and in mountain biking, it's the same thing. If you're dropping 400 watts into the pedals, but your bike's not moving forward super fast, you're wasting energy. I call it bleeding watts. So on the road, we see tons of guys and girls do this, where they're just bleeding watts all over the place. Wow, we can see takes a very straight line, moves his bike in a really smooth fashion, has phenomenal technique and body position, transferring the power straight into the pedal, straight into the tire. And his center of gravity is always positioned. So the climb was steep in the beginning. You could see his upper body was low and over the front of the bike. And you could see that he was really using his hip flexors on the upstroke, really getting it the maximum out of that without skidding the rear tire, hopping it around. A lot of novice riders, when they attack or they sprint, they'll feel that back tire skip all around. They'll feel it slide out. They'll feel it, move all over the place. That's just wasted energy. That's just wasted power. So if you were in a cyclocross bike or a mountain bike, you'd be going nowhere. On the road, you still go forward. But if you can maximize that initial jump, like we're talking about, you're going to go so much faster than everybody else. And it is these little details that make the difference. It's not the absolute sheer power that people think these riders have. All of them have amazing power. And just like motocross, too much power, really too much power. And they're racing below their maximums. They're racing where they need to be, to control, to think about, to time, to use the right cadence, to use the right gear. If you're maxed out, you can't think, you can't execute. So these riders are doing less than their maximums, which is very different than a lot of people think.
Well, Walt seems to have that effort pretty well managed, man. He's making it look almost easy out there. The way he beat Alaphilippe and Milan San Remo, the same way. Well, a little bit different, but same style sprint as he just won this one, and he's looking hard to beat. Speaking of Alaphilippe, it was interesting. That stage kind of looked like it was going to be a Wout van Aert, Alaphilippe, Alejandro Valverde showdown, and Alaphilippe was way down. He was 13th. Valverde was 4th. He got pipped by Egan. But what do you think's going on with Alaphilippe? Last year he had an amazing Tour de France, which is why I kind of want to see where you're at with him. But he just doesn't look like the same Alaphilippe that was in the Tour de France last year. Why do you think that is?
Probably a number of different reasons. I would guess the number one reason is I think a lot of these riders like to race into fitness, race into form. And I think Alaphilippe generally has started his season in Argentina and some of these other races, winning these races, but really the level is different than it is now. I think the level at this point in the season is higher than a traditional Argentina in February or January. So I think actually it's February. So like these riders, they're not, perhaps they're more comfortable racing into form. And we saw that Alaphilippe wasn't, I know he had some mechanical problems and timing issues, but wasn't super Strade Bianche, but was super in Milan San Remo. And I think coming into the Dauphiné, he knows it's going to be super hard. He knows it's going to be very, very difficult off the back of the races he just did. I think he's wants to do another good Tour de France. So I think he probably went into the race conservative with his fitness. And I think he's probably trying to, go up a level from all the hard efforts in the Dauphiné. You saw on the last stage, he was really good. We'll talk about that later, but he definitely, the way I saw it, it looks like he's riding into form, into fitness, not really pushing it too hard in the races or in the Dauphiné, but kind of always there, which is usually a surefire sign that someone is in control, but they're not looking to go super deep because they want to use the race for fitness.
And then I guess just to wrap up stage one, the last surprise for probably a lot of people out there was Peter Sagan. Peter Sagan, dropped on the final climb. And, this is a race that Peter Sagan can definitely win if he's in top shape. Where do you think Sagan's at? We got the Tour. He obviously wants to come and grab another green jersey and be competitive in that race. Do you think we're going to see the same Peter Sagan at the Tour de France in about a week and a half time?
I think Peter Sagan will have a shot at the green jersey. I don't think we'll see the same dominance as we've seen in the past with a green jersey or with. I mean, you got to think a guy like Alaphilippe could take the green jersey, and I'm not exactly sure what he's thinking right now, but based on the level of fitness that he has, I think GC isn't likely. I don't think that's not going to be a focus of his. Last year was a little bit crazy, kind of a Thomas Voeckler type situation. We never saw
Totally
We
crazy.
never saw Thomas Voeckler come back and ride GC in the Tour ever again. So I think it's going to be something. I don't think we'll see him trying to do GC. I think if he was trying to do GC, I think he would have used these races as GC races with his team riding for him and him playing the final. I think he would have chosen. I don't think he would have done Strada Bianchi and Milan San Remo. I think he would have done Burgos and Dauphiné for GC. So I don't think he's doing GC. I think he's doing green. I would guess he's doing green jersey. I'd say he's the guy that could beat Peter Sagan.
That would be something.
Peter Sagan, the mindset of Peter Sagan is very unique. So the same things that make him fantastic are the same things that, just like in life for all of us, are the same things that could ruin you. I think that he's so relaxed and he enjoys racing so much. I think he relies heavily on it for fitness and for sharpness. You heard him multiple times say, I'm not going to ride the trainer during this lockdown. I'm not going to participate in this stuff. Well, you could see that everybody really raised their level. If you look at the climbing speeds at the Dauphiné, they're phenomenal. Really high, really high VAM by lots of riders, not just the top ones, by lots and lots of riders. Early in the stages in the Dauphiné, some of the shorter climbs under 10 minutes, they were close to 2,000 VAM.
Wow.
Very, very, very fast peloton. So pretty much everybody during the lockdown used it as a chance to get ahead, which was smart. I think
that speaks
older
to a
riders,
lot of what you've been saying too for the last couple of years, Tom. You know, you've been predicting this for the last few years, talking about how just the overall level of the peloton is just getting higher and higher and higher and higher. So, you know, it's interesting that after some time off, you know, traditionally, you know, a few years ago, everybody would have come back slower, but now, you know, training has evolved and everything's evolved so much that these guys are coming out so much better.
Yeah, and there's just this, you know, I mean, there's kind of this overall growth mindset in like the business world, and now with social media, there's a lot of these speakers and people talking about this. I think a lot of athletes are listening to that and saying, "Oh, well, that's what I should do. I should always grow. I should always get better." And like as a coach, when I reflect on my career and my riding, I think I did what a lot of other people do, was build a mansion and burn it down every year. And instead of thinking, okay, can I grow off this in the off season, or where are the places in my season that has the lowest friction, and can I take advantage of this and grow? I would rest and I would go backwards there. And it was kind of like the whole peloton did it. And I think that's changed. And then also I think just the stability of the sport has changed, where it's very volatile. The teams, they come and go. The riders are there's just so much talent now. There's so many good riders coming up. You don't really have the same security that you had, where you had almost like these franchise players, right, that are on these teams for 10 years, and they're like, hey, you're our climbing guy, you're our this. And now these teams are like, okay, that's great, maybe I can get someone cheaper that's faster than you next year. And so it's, the level is hot because of that. And we saw this very same scenario really play out during the lockdown, because not only was it a lockdown, but it was just like teams were exploding. Riders' salaries were getting cut by 25 to 75%. Sponsors were pulling out. Teams were announcing their closure the year after. I mean, it was Armageddon out there. So I think everybody, you know, was like, we got to grow. So everybody grew, but then we're on this subject because we're talking about Peter Sagan, and Peter Sagan on the other side. I mean, he's a millionaire. He's got lots of business stuff. He's got a child. I think for him, he looked at this time as like, you know what, and this is what one of the reasons why he's so good, right? Is because he enjoys it. I'm not going to worry. I'm not going to stress. He's got like the Joker,
Why so serious?
yeah, tattooed on his upper body. So it's like, why so serious? So I mean, that's kind of how he is, right? So if there's a Vuelta or a World Championship, I would look for Peter Sagan there. Tour de France, he's not in the form. He doesn't. I think that yeah, he can go for the green jersey, but I think we're likely to see Alaphilippe or someone similar to that. Even Impey, right? Go balls to the wall. I mean, Impey would be another good one because it doesn't seem like there's any GC riders on his team that are riding well right now, well enough to do, have a full team commitment at the tour. So he might have free reign to go for the green jersey. So maybe people like Impey and Alaphilippe for the green jersey and contest Sagan's dominance.
There you go. There you go, listeners. You get T-Man going with the long shot prediction there. Alaphilippe and Impey challenging. Imagine Alaphilippe. That's so far-fetched for me. Alaphilippe challenging Peter Sagan for the green. That would be exciting. All right, Tom, let's move on to stage 2. Because, I mean, this stage was mind-blowing. It was the first above category mountaintop finish. Did you ever race this? I'll try to get the name right. It was called Sarsenas is the name of the mountain.
The second stage of the Dauphiné?
Stage 2, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like the Col de Port or some Laporte. I remember like it was all the talk was like, Richie Porte, are you going to win on the Col de Laporte? No, I didn't race on this climb before. Well, I mean, I didn't do it.
I think that was the name of the town, Col de Port, but I think the climb here on Pro Cycling Stats, yeah. Okay, it is, yeah, Col de Port. You're right.
Yeah, I think this climb I probably did mid-stage one of these races, but I don't think I did an uphill finish of it, but I've done so many mountaintop finishes, it's hard to keep track of them all, but I don't think that I did a finishing effort on that.
All right, so let's get into it. This is a meaty one. I mean, everybody was questioning Team Sky, Jumbo Visma, and this was the stage where we were all kind of sitting there going, all right, what's going to happen? It's like in grade school when, like a fight's going to go down outside of school, flagpole, 3 p.m. Like everybody's rocking up like, all right, let's see it. Team Sky comes to the front. Basically on the downhill, as you said, they were super disorganized. They're coming together, and they start pulling on the climb. And I'm not going to take it any further other than setting you up to explain what happened on Team Sky's effort to the top of the climb, because you're going to be able to just explain this so much better than me. What did you see in Team Sky on that climb, and why do you think Egan Bernal was totally disarmed by Primož Roglič in that finale?
Yeah, so Ineos, coming into this race, they had a very good Loctane race, and they righteously got their butt kicked by Jumbo Visma in Tour de Lane. So the media and everybody loves to write about how bad everybody's riding, and the reality is, like, we don't really know, like, are they riding bad or is Jumbo better? And I like to always just say, hey, like, this team Jumbo is better. So, Tour de Lane, Jumbo shows that they were better there. And here, stage 1, Jumbo comes back and says, bam, we're better, winning the stage. Then you start to see some insecurity coming from Ineos. And when these guys hit the front on this climb up the Col de Laporte, in my mind, I first looked for the order. And that's just the racer in me, because when teams pull on the front, a lot of times you gotta smell it out, because usually people pull way too hard. They're not as calculated as people would give them credit for. So in this case, when they hit the front and they start riding hard on this climb, it was, it wasn't even at the bottom. I think it was about a quarter of the way up the climb. They just got on the front. It was when the climb kind of leveled off, even, which for me was exposed some of their tactics. But they put Castrovejo on the front, so we all saw Tour de Lane. We saw that Castrovejo was the strongest, the second strongest guy on that team. We saw the race before, the Loctane, we saw Sivakov. He was the strongest rider. But we did see that Geraint Thomas and Chris Froome and even Kwiatkowski were not riding as well as Castrovejo or Sivakov. So as this train hit the front, they put Castrovejo on the front, with the lineup behind was Kwiatkowski, who probably was their second best climber. He was second, and then behind him was I think Geraint Thomas.
It was originally Froome.
Yeah, well, but
G was behind Froome.
No, I think Froome was behind G. I think Froome was the one that was in front. Actually, I remember this really well. Froome was the one that was in front of Bernal, and then on Bernal's wheel was Sivakov. So when I saw that happening, I thought, this is a smoke show. These guys are bluffing, because like it would look like the lineup that it was like, oh my gosh, like these guys, oh my gosh, G and Froome is amazing, because they're Bernal's like last guys, and Sivakov is sitting on the wheel, sweeping Bernal's wheel, which is normally you would see him in front of Bernal. So like it was just a little bit fishy for me straight away. And when Castrovejo started riding, the peloton didn't reduce very much at all. In fact, this Ineos team was on the front with Castrovejo, who did 75% of this climb, and it was like a parade behind. 40 riders still there with all the way till 5K to go. That's not how you shred a climb using your team. This is how you nurse your team up the climb, is you ride this hard pace that's kind of tricks people, that it's uncomfortable. No one really wants to do anything, but it's not enough to shred the peloton. If you look at Ineos's tactics years past, the peloton is in pieces, like, 5K into the climb. And here we are all the way up till 5K, this Ineos parade with all the GC riders and extras in the parade. Everybody's in the show. So like, if I'm sure, Jumbo sniffed this out, but it just really, to me, it really showed some insecurity, because it really was show, and everybody, all the media and everybody bought it, right? At first they're like, oh my gosh, Ineos is incredible. What a show. They didn't understand. They didn't figure it out. And as soon as Castrovejo pulled off, Bernal, you could see he got on the radio and he said, Kwiatkowski, pull hard. He started pulling hard. They blew up the whole team. So in 1 kilometer, he detonated Froome. Froome just did the old smoke and shoe, just slipped out of there.
Have a nice day, boys.
Yep. He just slipped right out. And then all of a sudden, shortly after him, you could see that Geraint Thomas was on the rivet. And Kwiatkowski pulled, a kilometer maybe. And then when Geraint Thomas got on the front, you could visibly see that the peloton slowed. And that's while Kwiatkowski was pulling, you could see that Sivakov was blowing up behind Bernal. No communication, it seems, whatsoever, where people are saying, get off the front, I'm not good. Hey, this is too hard. We don't have it. it was all about the show. And because as soon as those guys were done, as soon as Geraint Thomas was done, Sivakov tried to take a pull, and one rider from Bora attacked, and that was it. He was done. Everybody jumped on, and quickly Jumbo saw that as an opportunity to dislodge the rest of Ineos. And within just one attack, they were able to get rid of all of Ineos by covering one attack. Sepp Kuss was there, did that move.
Boy, did he show up, man. He showed up on stage one. His presence, like you could see that guy's presence as in service of Roglic. He was amazing.
Yeah, so this stage 2 was really revealing and really showing, and it's like, oh my gosh, wow, these guys are Ineos very exposed with this strange strategy here. And then Bernal his reaction again, I think supports what I was saying last week, where it's like his leadership skills need some work, and his ability to read races needs some work, because as soon as he was isolated, his reaction was to attack. And the race wasn't hard enough, for one, for him to attack where he did. And two, you could see he doesn't really have a great ability to lift the cadence, get out of the saddle, and just launch a really vicious attack, which is what the races that he won before. He just went nuclear speed up climbs. And now we have a peloton. We have a group of leaders and riders that all can do nuclear speed. So it's not, he needs more game. And we could see quickly his reaction time and his understanding of his game is off, because he rolled past Lotto or Jumbo with in a low cadence, seated, tried to attack. Sepp Kuss, high cadence standing, went straight on the wheel, no problem, and then went straight around him. By Bernal doing this attack, he exposed himself. He used a bullet. He put himself above his threshold. Sepp Kuss said, "Thank you very much. I'm gonna pull you back, keeping Roglic at or just below his threshold, and I'm gonna keep the pace high. So who counterattacks next, I can go above my threshold and cover it, and then Roglic's gonna counter." And that's exactly what happened. Quintana took the bait, throws another attack, counters Bernal's attack. So two Colombian people not working together, counters them, blows himself up, and Roglic says, "Thank you very much." Changes his cadence, high cadence, seated, which is sort of his ammo, right? Bam. Immediately gets a gap, drops Bernal, drops Quintana, the two people that attacked. They took the bait. He said, "Later, see ya." First stage win. Barely put any energy into that stage win. Did the absolute minimum with his team, absolute minimum with his effort, and got the absolute maximum. So that was amazing. We saw Ineos use a lot of energy, put on a big show. All, I think, because they were insecure, and it really kind of shows that there is some leadership stuff going on with that team, I think.
What's interesting there is there were 10 guys rolled in to finish together in the first group. 4 of those 10 were Colombian. So those guys were all doing all right in the lockdown.
They're also just the best riders. I mean, I think the Colombian folks in that group are the regular faces that we see at the front of these races last year as well. And so, at the beginning of the year before the lockdown too, we saw Quintana lighting everybody on fire. We saw
lighting it up.
Yeah. So not big surprises at all there. But yeah, there was definitely some surprises in leadership and tactics.
So stage three, David Formolo wins the bike humping award of the year. Did that guy's effort was so impressive. Like just watching him, the entire time on that final climb. I was just appreciating how much he was suffering. Like, did you catch any of that?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of Formolo's style. Like he kind of wiggles around on the bike, and based on the speed that he was going and the time checks, and I think he was very within himself. I just think that he likes to get out there and just really get into it. You know, use a lower cadence a lot, which was really smart, conserving glycogen, being really efficient, keeping maximum torque on the and chain tension on the gearing, and getting the maximum speed out of the minimum effort. So he also did a really good job surfing the terrain, getting up to speed out of the corners, over the transitions from steep to shallow. I've been teammates with Formolo. He's a super classy rider, very much understands cycling tactics himself. Great person. My first Grand Tour with him was a Giro, and it was his first Grand Tour stage win. I think it was his only Grand Tour stage win so far. So it was cool being a part of that. You know, setting him up. I was in a breakaway with him that he launched out of, pulled for him, and you know he understands how to be very efficient in these breakaway scenarios. And so it may have looked like he was suffering, but he was very much in control, and really just I think trying to stay relaxed. I think a lot of times if you kind of make that relaxed pain face, move your body around, I think you can get a little bit more out of your body than if you're just trying to stay stone cold aggro. So
Whatever it is, it's entertaining to watch him ride a bike. You know, he's not the Wout van Aert who's like motionless until he's done his job for the day. It's like he's really just totally into it. It's exciting. And you're right. I mean, he had to have been pretty efficient to hold off, you know, a charging Roglic, Thibaut Pinot, and Emmanuel Buchmann. Like the crew that was coming up the climb behind him, they weren't messing around. And
the way he rode the last climb was really smart too. The first part of the climb, we know the peloton accelerates at the bottom, and he went easier there, so he could conserve energy for the point where the peloton kind of explodes, because you're not going to be able to match the peloton speed up the first part of these climbs. You're just not. So if you can minimize the effort that you use and also minimize the time that you lose, then you can maximize your gains in the middle part of the climb where the riders from behind have exploded. So he did a really good job just losing, I think, about a minute, 30 seconds to a minute in that first part of the climb. And then in the middle part, when the riders behind were messing around and recovering from their big effort at the bottom, he really poured it on and basically brought the gap back up a little bit there, and then just maintained that last kilometer, that last part of the climb. Did the absolute best he could, surfing the terrain, did a really good job, and stayed away. So really phenomenal effort, 100%, really good. And again, Jumbo Visma rode the race phenomenally. Being they were very proactive on this one, using their climbers to set a hard pace, so barely anyone could attack. And then when riders did attack, like we saw Kalma, or this new Bora rider, when he attacked, they just let him go. They just kept riding the same pace, read the gap, and slowly brought him back by surfing the terrain behind. So really good riding from Formolo, and again, really classy, awesome riding from Jumbo Visma. And what another thing I'd like to point out is just kind of the attitude from Ineos. So I just see him super checked out. We just saw him riding all around, all in different areas, and we saw them getting dropped earlier than they were dropped the day before. So definitely a big mojo decrease from that team, and big lack of mojo, which was really surprising. You would think that they would come back and say, oh, you know, we got to get in shape, or we got to fine tune our form, or we're going to go in the break and mess this up. But they just all kind of rode in the group and then got dropped. So it was definitely, I think that was telling.
it was interesting because at the top there, Egan lost 9 seconds to Roglic, right? So was that hey, I'm not really going to be taking this race all the way to the end, anyways. And then he posted on his Instagram with his tongue out, like like he was cracked. Was he actually accepting defeat from Roglic on that day, or was he just sitting up, letting a little bit of time go, with his mindset being, I'm focused on 2 weeks from now. I'm not starting tomorrow anyways.
I don't want to speculate too much. I mean, I don't really know, but I think it's telling for sure. I mean, he's dropped in the final part of the race. He's really been, from an outsider point of view, it seems like his fitness has been declining over the course of the last races. So yes, so I think that he's got to have some concern, where came into the first race was good, was won, and then the second race was good but not as good as the first race, and then this race definitely not as good as the last race. So the fitness is declining rather than what you would expect, which is interesting. So I think in his mind, he's starting to question things, and we did see him not start the race, saying that he had a bad back. I think that's telling. Without speculating and saying anything, I think that perhaps he's reevaluating his fitness, his conditioning, and thinking, I need to make some changes in a very short period of time. I need all the days I can get. So, but I know from a let's go back to leadership, because we've been talking about leadership, right? Like that's not the right decision for leadership. When the captain, who the team works for and has sacrificed the season to work for, pulls out of the race, I think it's not good leadership. It's not a good example. You have to inspire people to rise to your level. You can't expect them to rise to your level. They're currently not rising to your level. By you bailing and leaving them there, I don't think that's good leadership.
I don't know. I would bet against that being entirely Egan's decision. I'm sure he's got people advising him on what he needs to do. So I would say somebody told him he needed to probably pull out of the race, but we'll see. So stage 4 finished in a breakaway. Pretty stacked breakaway went up the road that day. We don't need to talk about the breakaway too much because it didn't really shake up the GC, and we didn't really, from the breakaway, I don't think, other than Alaphilippe, we didn't really see too many players that are going to be, big factors in the Tour de France up there mixing it up. But Primož Roglic crashed hard, bro. He hit the ground hard. Steven Krajcewicz crashed out of the race, and that was kind of a big blow to Jumbo-Visma. But at the same time, we saw like Dumoulin really start to take his form. So it was an interesting day for Jumbo-Visma, kind of scary in a lot of perspectives. You've hit the deck, man. You know how hard it is for your body to recover. How do you think Primo's going to be from that impact come the Tour? Is that going to hold him back at all?
It's tough to know, not knowing the extent of his injuries. The fact that he did not start, but he did finish the stage. So I mean, we can Sherlock Holmes this. He did finish the stage, and didn't lose time. So with that we can be probably 95% sure that he's okay. Any sort of injury that you would have had that would stop you from doing the Tour probably wouldn't be able to finish the stage in the front group. And if there is something broken, probably going to be able, if he could do that, he probably can ride the Tour with something broken. So I don't think that he has anything broken. I don't know, but whatever it is, it seems that he'll be able to ride the Tour, and the form that he's on and the condition that he's on and the build that he's had over the last years, everything would suggest that he's going to be the best rider in the Tour. So I think by him not starting probably was a you were talking about, you were saying that you think Bernal's decision is a team decision, although the only person that came out from the team and said anything was Geraint Thomas in an interview. The team made no comment whatsoever supporting his withdrawal or talking about the team plan. However, Roglic, there was a team communication. He gave a communication. There was a clear communication that said, "Hey, I'm beat up. I need to recover in time from the tour for my crash." Totally makes sense. Tough call, right? In the leader's jersey, big win. On the opposite, we see sort of the insecurity of how Ineos rode the race. We saw the insecurity of how Ineos handled the Bernal exit. On the opposite, we see Jumbo-Visma with security and confidence, owning the crash, owning the injuries. Kreiswick out, owning the injury of Kreiswick, saying he has a dislocated shoulder. We're not sure if he'll be able to race. Big difference. And being on these teams, with the team leadership takes the decision, and the team leadership is making decisions that are in the benefit of the rider and the long-term team strategy, it's easy for the riders to buy in and follow. So Jumbo-Visma, their leadership, everything that's happened makes a lot of sense. To me, I think that he's going to be okay, and I think that they handled it really well, and I think that moving forward, the motivation is very, very good. So if Kreiswick can't start, I still think, I mean, between Dumoulin, Kuss, Bennett, that's plenty of climbers. So
it's
hopefully,
still a team.
Yeah, and Wout proved that he can climb almost as fast as a climber. So
Plus pull the whole stage.
Yeah, plus pull the whole stage. So I would expect them to be in okay condition after that crash.
All right, and let's talk about stage 5. This is the highlight of the whole podcast. Stage 5. Just because we saw some insane performances here, and it was such an exciting stage because like Primož Roglic, they didn't start the stage. He had a huge gap going into the stage, like a 14-second lead. All he had to do was follow everybody for the final day, and he had the GC sealed. Seemed like he probably could have put time into people if he wanted to. So stage 5 opens up, and you did an incredible analysis yesterday on Sepp Kuss's file. So you really know, every bit of every climb that went down on there on that day.
Yeah, I mean,
what were your key takeaways from riders? Because Martinez ended up winning the overall, right? The day before he was 5th on GC. Thibaut Pinot was ahead of him. Landa, who again is a favorite for the Tour de France, was ahead of him. There were some guys that were ranked above him, not only on the GC but also in favorites for the Tour de France, who ended up losing to Martinez on the final day. So how do you think that ended up playing out? I definitely want to touch on Pinot, being one of the main favorites here for the Tour de France.
Yeah, so we saw there's a lot of telling things in the stage. And first of all, a mountain stage like this, 100 miles, 6 climbs, all different types of climbs, short, steep, long, gradual, long with steep pitches, back-to-back hard climbs. Really, really telling stage. Very, very traditional mountain stage. I haven't looked at the Tour route for sure, but generally the Dauphiné puts the same mountain stages in the Tour. I need to check that because this stage very well might be an actual stage or have the majority of the climbs from the Tour in it. So what we saw in this race, I think will be very similar to what we'll see in the aggressive mountain stages. We saw almost no breakaway going, rider after rider attacking, very similar to like what you would see in the second or third week of the Tour where there's so many people far down on GC, they're just trying to get in the break. In the Dauphiné, similar situation. I think early on the climbs, a lot of the riders that were down on GC were attacking. But when you're doing that on a climb, you're going to see the cream rise to the top. And the same thing happens in the Tour and the Grand Tours is these riders that are low on GC are ripping the climb in half. And the GC riders are looking around and seeing, oh, well, let's just follow these guys and see see what happens. And this is just what happened, right? They started following the other riders. It started blowing apart. Lots of big numbers. Looking at Sepp's performance, and he's one of the best climbers in the world right now. Seeing his numbers going up those first climbs, you knew it was going to be an explosion. I mean, the climbs that the efforts that he was doing up the first few climbs, for the first two climbs, were much more than they did on the last two climbs. So very telling there, blew a lot of riders up, and not very many riders could even go in the break. We saw Alaphilippe finally get off the front and Sivakov get off the front. Telling again, does Alaphilippe go for the green jersey? Well, he's going to go for stage wins for sure, but you can see his form by his ability to get off the front in such a hard stage over a reduced peloton that was maybe 30 riders, all best riders. Then going into the last two climbs, there was a short climb of about 7 minutes. And here Pogačar went bonkers with Lopez, bridging across to attacks on the short. So basically there was a short 7-minute climb down, and then the last climb, which basically took about 30 minutes, which was kind of in two parts. We saw Pogačar and Lopez attack. Lopez high on GC, Pogačar high on GC, and we saw Thibaut Pinot choose not to follow, which for me is very telling on how this guy plans on becoming a Grand Tour winner. You can't win a Grand Tour like that. No way. And here he is, virtual yellow jersey in the race, got it all wrapped up. All he's got to do is follow these top people on climbs. They weren't even to the stage of hitting him all over the place on the flats and the downhills and stuff like that. And the race finished on a massive climb. So the rationale in this guy's mind is mind-blowing. To see these riders attack that are right behind you on GC on a steep climb that you're going to have to ride, and he just basically goes into default mode and starts riding tempo, which is mind-blowing, because
so it wasn't a question of fitness.
There couldn't be a worse thing to do than that, because that just makes it easier on your competition behind. This is the sort of move that you would do if it's a code red scenario. It's not a code red because he's not getting dropped, but so he does this tempo. This is when Sepp realizes there's an opportunity. He bridges across.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question on Pinot. Do you think that comes down, that insecurity comes down, or is it insecurity from having a weaker team, a team that's not as strong as some of these other squads we see there? Do you think that's where that comes from with Pinot?
I mean, I know some of his teammates. They're strong. This is leadership, perhaps how he used his teammates, but you use them up early on, chasing pointless breakaways away, doing work. Who knows exactly what went wrong, but it's okay for him to be isolated with 2 climbs to go, 25K in the stage. You really don't need that many teammates. No one else had really any teammates at this point. I don't think that that's what went through his mind. I just think that he doesn't have leadership. He doesn't understand racing very well, and he doesn't really have a very good leadership, very, very good leadership qualities, making decisions strategically. I mean, in the past, he's really been this rider that just kind of follows the favorites and then attacks them.
But Tom, maybe you can tell us, for like people that haven't raced in the World Tour, like how much influence does your director in the radio have over what you do out there? Is his director not kind of seeing what's going down on the road and giving him feedback?
Probably not that much influence. I think usually the directors are 5 to 10 minutes too late behind, making calls and decisions. And I think with Pogačar or whatever attacked, with the riders that I coach professionally and the riders that I coach amateur wise, the number one thing that you have to do is you have to respond right away. And that's not a decision that the car behind can make for you. If Pogačar and Lopez shift and accelerate, you need to go too. You can't wait for the call. Do I go with that or do I not go with that? Because it's on a climb. You're going to have to go hard. It's towards the finish. These homies are not far down on you on GC. And if you don't go with them, you're going to be forced in this scenario where you're going to be chasing them, which is the same in amateur in races that we see all the time in these local races. Riders will let breaks go. Well, who's going to do the work to bring that back? You know, so follow it, because, you know, chances are someone won't follow you, and then you're up the road already, and you don't have to deal with doing any chasing.
So those are not good signs.
And so here, and so here's the last thing about this. Let's be real. Pinot was top 3, top 5, top 3. He could follow the best riders in this race all the way up until now. He had been dropping the 2 riders that attacked, no problem following those riders. So not a good move at all. And then you could see as he's chasing behind, he was really like all over the place. He wasn't really even riding a steady pace. He was like going hard and then easing up, and then riders would attack him. And so the last thing that was mind blowing was he had 2 French riders in the group, Bardet and who's the guy that won a KOM jersey a couple years ago? The French rider. He's on Quintana's team now. I don't know what his name.
Martin Guillaume.
No. He's a big French guy, famous Warren Barguil.
Yeah.
You have Bardet and you have Barguil in this freaking small group of favorites left with Dumoulin and why those guys didn't help him and chase is just mind blowing. And Bardet and Barguil were both attacking him.
Is that a thing anymore? Is there like that countryman relationship? Because like it looks like it does not exist.
Well, it really should. It really should, because these riders were not on GC really high up, and they had everything to gain by working with Pinot. So the fact that these folks did not help him I think is just poor taste. It's stupid, and it really just kind of, it just really just shows like how weak a lot of these riders are with leadership, because in this case, you got to put it on Pinot too, right? He must have treated these guys poorly for their behavior to be the way it is. But so let's talk about Sepp Kuss. Sees the opportunity, bridges across, and he takes Danny Martinez with him. Danny Martinez, all of a sudden, high on GC. Lopez, high on GC. 2 riders that quickly, easily jump over Pinot and GC within seconds. Sepp rides his zones up the climb. Martinez actually drops Sepp. Sepp rides his zones up the climb, stays within himself.
Cheeky, eh? That attack Lopez launched?
Not Lopez, Martinez. But Martinez was that was a mistake. I think normally had Martinez not done that, he probably would have had more juice in the end. But who knows? And so why this is important is because you never know. Everyone could say, oh, well, Martinez won the GC. But you never really know like how much juice you're going to have in the very end. And if you can get across to that gap using less energy, you're going to be all right. So Martinez just jumps Sepp, goes across to a gap, and then sits up once he gets to the gap. So
incredible maturity on Sepp's behalf.
Yeah, incredible maturity. Really smart using his zones. A little bit of immaturity there with Martinez. But what is telling also about this is this final select group here was not like a lot of journalists wrote, where it was kind of like, oh, these guys just flew the coop and the GC favorites sat behind. No, these riders dropped the GC riders straight up. So aside from Dumoulin, who had great legs, but Sepp went ahead, so Dumoulin stayed behind and policed that group. Aside from him, those riders could not go with Martinez, Lopez, Pogacar, and Kuss. So, you know, they just did not have the same legs. Martinez was obviously very, very strong.
It was Lopez wasn't up there, was he? No,
Yes, Lopez went across with Pogacar.
because he finished.
He blew up on.
down.
Well, no, he blew up on the last climb, and so he was very active in attacking that group all the way, and that's really at the end what Sepp Kuss used to springboard his victory. One of Lopez's attacks, which set up Sivakov, who Sivakov did. So Lopez attacked, who had attacked many times, attacked again. Sepp did not chase that. Martinez chased that move with Pogacar behind. Sepp stayed on Pogacar, and then Sivakov attacked. Sepp followed Sivakov because it was a really steep climb. That brought out only the two other strong riders, Martinez and Pogacar, drop Lopez, but Lopez was only dropped because of his ridiculous attacks, one after another on flat roads. So not really, really smart riding by him. Very impulsive, very aggressive. For a guy that, you know, if you were his coach, you would work with him and you say, hey, dude, but he was the same time as Martinez. He could have been second overall in this race, in the finish. You would say, hey, look, like, work with Martinez, and then you're a faster finisher than Martinez. Win the stage or take the bonus seconds and get the overall that way. Why he was trying to drop everybody with 25K to go or 20K to go or 15K to go, all those moves, I mean, it's just not very smart riding, not very strategic riding. So we saw that move set up Sivakov went. Then there was Sepp followed. Only Pogacar and Martinez were able to go. Sepp saw them on the limit, and he countered at an excellent spot where it was about 30 seconds steep, and then it transitioned to a flat part of the climb. This is a fantastic spot. You get a gap over the steep part, and then you surf and keep that power floor up in the flat part. And you always get a gap on that transition because the riders behind, they'll go hard to the steep part, and then they sit up. And this is what happens. They look at each other. They're not willing to put in a chase on that flat part because they know the other rider's getting a draft. So they hesitate and they wait for the next steep part to chase. And this is where Sepp immediately got 30 seconds with only a 1 minute effort of 460 watts. So overall, so really smart move by Sepp, but ultimately was teed up by Lopez and Sivakov, and those were the two riders that got dropped. So really, really smart riding by Sepp to read that.
That technique you pointed out in your analysis video was pretty cool. The way you showed how he used that cadence change out of that one corner to really get that speed up was amazing. Talk to us a little bit about how important changing your cadence is for these guys to open up time gaps like that.
Cadence changes is everything, and you want to think of like your cadence like RPMs in a car. So if you watch Formula One or you watch, MotoGP or motocross, or you just drive your car around, think of the sound of the engine as like your cadence. Optimally, the best place to accelerate is the high cadence, and then the best place to be economical with your gas and to maintain your speed is a lower RPM. So it's the same as like on the highway. When you accelerate up to speed, you're in those high RPMs. As soon as you get up to that cruising speed, you shift to a harder gear, you do lower RPM. The torque on the gearing and the chain down to the wheels keeps that speed, maintain that speed, but enables you to use less RPMs, ultimately less energy, which is less fuel. This is everything in cycling. It's even more so in cycling than in car racing and motorcycle racing. However, people just don't even know about it. They don't even talk about it. A lot of people don't even do it. So like in this case, it's just a great way, an easy way to make your power go a lot faster and be able to use overall less power at the end. So if you're able to do that, you're able to get out front easier, and you're able to stay out front easier because like we were talking before with Martinez and some of these other riders, you don't know what's going to happen next. Sepp could go in the move. One of these other riders could be bluffing behind and bridge across. If you're flat out in the front there, if they come across, you're going to have no game for them when they come up there. So using these techniques really sets yourself up to ultimately go faster and protect yourself if something happens from behind or from ahead. So, really good riding and really good use. If you go back and watch the footage, you can see that he was working the transitions between the steep to flat the hardest, staying on the gas, pushing hard, and behind. This is where those riders are easing up because they don't want to give a free ride, so to speak, or too much of a free ride to the other riders. So big advantage there when you're out front.
We had a good question from Instagram. On my Instagram story, I let people know that we were going to be doing this podcast. So somebody asked, how do these races that lead up to the Tour de France compare to another sport like the NFL, where they have a preseason? In NFL, the preseason games don't really mean anything. The stars aren't playing as much time as they will be in the big games, and the intensity is just not there. How do these races have anything in common with that setup, or are these all out, or are these as intense as they get?
It's just different sport, right? So first of all, let's just finish up on that stage 5. Sepp Kuss goes on to win. For the listeners that don't know, Sepp Kuss goes on to win from that move solo. Danny Martinez finished second, goes on to win, like we mentioned, the overall Dauphiné. So cool performance from those guys. Awesome to see an American and obviously Colorado rider Sepp win a beautiful race and a beautiful stage like that. So back to the question, preseason stuff, it's different with cycling because, when in a lot of these preseason games, they're using different lineup, they're using different players, they're using different strategies. They're trying not to show their cards ahead of time. Maybe they're testing some things. They're testing some plays, some fitness, some other people. In cycling, it's different. The best comparison to this would be comparing the playoffs to the Super Bowl, or right, the playoffs to the championship. This is like the playoffs. Maybe you could like use this same analogy, like you're talking about, like local group rides, like where these favorites are in their local group rides, and someone went and looked at their local group rides and saw how they're riding in November, and then tried to make a correlation to the season. That's the similar thing, right? But we're 2 weeks before this. We're in the playoffs. This is the playoffs. So they're tuning up the engine. They're sparring with their competition. They're testing everything out. This stuff counts. I know the journalists and the people at home want to think that the Dauphiné is like a small race, but it's a World Tour race. It has a lot of points. It's big television coverage. The other thing is you never know what's going to happen. You never know if Roglic crashes out. You never know. You could go to the Tour de France and break your wrist the first day. So you really, if you're in shape, if you're in form, you really gotta take advantage of it. You really gotta do it. So what we're seeing in these races is pretty close to what you're gonna see in the Tour for the most part. I would say that the area that the people are holding back is the way they attack the climbs. I think Jumbo-Visma could have shredded that climb that we saw Ineos do the parade up. I think Jumbo-Visma could have shredded the climb that Formula One after. I think that Jumbo-Visma could have shredded the climb that the stage that Sepp won, had Roglic been in the race. Things like that. They didn't. Jumbo actually rode a really conservative race. They are just really good. So I don't see them losing their goodness at all. I do think Ineos is going to up their game, but in the past, again, like their strategy has been obliterate every single race they go to. In fact, this has been the winning strategy the last 6 years, 7 years. We have never seen a Tour de France winner or a Tour de France winning team just show up out of the blue. This is a hard sport. This is a hard race.
1999 we did.
I think that he had won races, and I think he was high in Romandy and a lot. I think they were at the front. I think he was second in Liège, best on Liège, right? Some of these other races, Amstel Gold, I think he was, or Amstel Gold, he was second. Like,
Were you on Saturn then?
what year was that?
99.
No, I wasn't racing yet. I was on Saturn in 2003. But so, like, I don't think that idea that people are like, oh, they're going to come into shape next week, or that just doesn't exist. It's too hard. It's to have that level of fitness is more than just like this magic show that people think it is. Do a lot of like all the coaches out there with a TSS, and do a bunch of TSS and then take some rest, and your form just skyrockets. It's not how that works. You got to build the zones, you got to practice the technique, and really what we're seeing in these races is working on the mindset, working on the strategy, practicing the fueling. There's just no place to hide in these races. You couldn't even just in these races, you couldn't even if you were Roglic, you couldn't even ride easy in these races. They're too hard. We see the first climbs of these races, riders are doing 7 watts per kilo up them. You're time cut if you're not doing that. So no, we're not seeing the preseason stuff. That's group rides in November. We're seeing playoffs. We're seeing the real deal. We're seeing pretty close to what we're going to see in the Tour de France. Like I said, there are some riders like Alaphilippe that the way that they're riding, you can see that they are going to be in better shape. But Alaphilippe was in that final selection, was solo when there was only 30 riders left behind. He's showing a good level. So, meanwhile, we see Astana mopping the floor with people everywhere. Those folks are going to be good. There's a lot of good riders floating around in these races, but it is. And so here's the last part with this coronavirus shutdown, smash season. There's not a lot of time for magic shows and big changes. Whereas a traditional season, there's about a month or so between the key races. That's a lot of time. A lot can change in a month. Not a lot's going to change in 2 weeks. And if you're not, and so here's the last part of it. If you're not in fitness going in, you don't, like a lot of people think, oh, you're riding into fitness. If you're not in top, shape going into these races, you get a beat down the first part of the races. You don't get fitter. You get more tired. So what people confuse from like building form is riders are being conservative in the beginning. They're fine tuning their existing really high level, but by conserving energy, and then they unleash that energy at the end. Whereas in the beginning, some other riders are wasting energy, using a lot of energy, and that transition in power is what people confuse for. Oh, they're riding into form. No, those riders were conservative. They have more glycogen. They have more energy in the tank for the last part of the race, and they fine-tuned their top end, so it's working really nicely. So
were Froome and Geraint Thomas riding into form, or were they getting the beat down?
I would say that they're riding into form. So I don't think that they turn themselves inside out in this race. So I would say that those two riders are going to be better, much better in the Tour de France, but not GC level better. I don't think that's possible. Helper for Bernal, possible. The same level as the Jumbo Visma riders, I don't think so. So they'll be able to hang on the climb longer, but I don't know. I don't think it will be enough.
All right, let's do one last question from the Instagram. We're going to want to talk about this anyways. How do you think this year's GC Tour battle will go? I think it's a year for the youngsters taking over. I mean, the youngster took over last year. The youngster already won. But what do you think about the GC battle in the Tour de France this year?
I think you're going to see a really strong Jumbo Visma that's gonna no BS, no BS, right? Just no BS. Just controlling, strong, safe, very calculated, not making a lot of mistakes, not showing a lot of emotion, controlling the race very, very well. I think that we're going to see Jumbo take that role over this year. Rightfully so. They've earned it. Going into this race, they've earned it. And I think if you're in Ineos's position, you've got to use that first part of the tour to refine your fitness and form that's not quite there. So we're going to see Jumbo come in. I think Ineos will, relinquish the reins on that for the first half of the race and say, okay, guys, you're the favorites, take on. And they're going to work and try to improve their form to mount an attack. I would hope, if I was their director, if I was involved in that team, I would say, guys, you need to be aggressive. We need to see an aggressive Ineos. We need to see Geraint Thomas and Chris Froome or whoever is on that team, or Sivakov in the break. And when we need to, halfway through it, we need to see Bernal launching bombs going across to a break. And, we need to see some Giro stuff. That's what we need to see. Like Carapaz or whatever, like how he won the Giro. We need to see Bernal win the Tour like that. I think that's going to be how he has to win the Tour, which is different than Ineos has done in the past.
Do you think that's within Ineos?
I would, yeah. I think I think they have to change their strategy, but I think that is a very good strategy. I think you put a Thomas, you put a Kwiatkowski, you put a Sivakov, you put any of those riders up the road, and you have a super, a super Bernal go across. That's gonna drop some jumbos. That's gonna isolate Roglic. Maybe Sepp will be able to go with that. Hopefully, Sepp there probably, but not too many other guys. So and if you're playing that card too, like with Ineos, if you're putting those guys in there, Jumbo's got to think, well, maybe we need to put some guys there. That's going to reduce their team on the other side. So I think, Jumbo's going to have to do, or excuse me, Ineos is going to have to take that sort of a tactic. I think the steamroll the race, that's not going to happen. So you're going to have to look at this tactic, and I think that tactic could work. And if they do that tactic, back to that question you saw, this is where we're going to see some new stars shine. The Bora homie, we're going to see. This is where like Landa. I mean, Landa has proved to not be able to do in the Tour de France the GC game traditionally. But Landa always picks up steam in the middle towards the end. Landa clearly needs some steam. This sort of move, aggressive in breakaways, trying to take big time on stages, that could work for Landa. So we might see this some partners. Quintana, this is also a great strategy for Quintana. So if these guys, and this is a great strategy for EF too. So if we can just see a change in thinking here, and we start to see some long bombs mid-stage by these riders and blowing it to pieces, that's where we're going to see Martinez and some of these other riders contend for the overall. And I think that'll be exciting. But if everybody waits to the last climb, that's textbook. We saw in the Dauphiné, doesn't work. I think that the people will have to take that aggressive strategy if they want to truly win. And that's a tough one, right? That's a tough one. A lot of times, I know I'm talking a lot, but a lot of times, like, getting to that place where you're willing to take that risk requires a beatdown. Really, like, people, and I've seen it in my career, people come to these races and they forget what happened 2 weeks ago. I think there's going to be a lot of people that forgot the Dauphiné and Tour de l'Ain, a lot of people that forgot these races, and they think, you know what, I feel good. My form's good. I did a test on my 20-minute climb. I did my best ever power. I think I'm better than Roglic or whatever. And I think there will be the first stages, some of these people that just follow up and then they get crushed. And that's when they say, okay, now I'm going in the break, but maybe you've already lost too much time, So it's going to be interesting to see who actually has the balls to use this different strategy and how early they deploy it, I think is
probably going to have a lot to do with the success. I think if you wait too late in the race, the stronger riders just make a bigger gap between the weaker riders. So, but we'll see.
Well, the climbing kicks off early, gets popping on stage 4. So they're not going to waste. They're not going to waste a lot of time getting the race started. It'll be an exciting Tour de France for sure. So, who's your pick then? Roglic? You're going with Roglic?
Yeah, I mean, you would be guessing. I mean, this is like we're talking science and we're talking like hocus pocus, right? Like the science. You know what I mean? Like if you want to go with the studies have shown, right? Like, I mean, let's be real. We've seen everything now. There's no place to hide. There's no place to hide. So, we haven't had a season of 6 months, and we haven't, everybody's come out to these races. It's been a condensed month that we've seen everybody, and now it's go time. So we've had our control. We've seen the science says that Roglic is the best rider. The science, right? That's Roglic is the best rider. So you'd be just betting against the science and saying, you know what, the universe doesn't like Roglic, right? And I'm gonna throw the wild card that he gets sick or he gets a stomach virus or some magic happens and all of a sudden somebody's better. But if you're doing the science and you're looking at the data, Roglic is the Tour de France champion. But we all know that the universe can intervene. Their crashes happen, illness, as we saw. Illness happens, mistakes happen. So the best rider, the proven rider, has to use the right strategy. He has to read the race correctly. He has to have the team to back him, has to have the leadership in his management to be able to manage his team, he has to have the nutrition to stay fueled. I think Jumbo is invested in all of that. So the data supports Roglic for Tour de France champion. But
they look good.
The universe stuff happens, but it's just like Dauphiné. You could say Martinez won, but Martinez was not the best rider. Roglic was the best rider. Was Martinez better than everybody else? Yes, Martinez was better than everybody else. So, can Martinez mount an overall challenge? Why not? Science says he can. He's performed well. So I think we'll see some riders like that up there.
But it seems far-fetched. It seems like even if Roglic wasn't the guy, Dumoulin, the way he was building form, could still. I almost feel like Dumoulin could win the Tour de France himself. He's starting to look scary good.
Well, he was second in the Tour 2 years ago, or third in the Tour 2 years ago. He's won the Giro. Yeah, of course Dumoulin can win the Tour. But just like Sepp, we saw that when Sepp was done with his job, he sat up like from good leadership. Good leadership said, Sepp, you're rewarded if you do your job and you set up and you recover for the next day. Could have Sepp stayed on the gas and only lost 10 seconds some of those other stages? Yes, he could have. Could he have won the Dauphiné? Yes, he could have. But the team said no. The team, and this is what good leadership is you're rewarded for your teamwork. And if you're thinking that, if my teammate has a problem or something else happens, I need to be available to win the race, you're not really committed to the task at hand. And I think good leadership is like all in or we all burn together. It's how it has to be. The human brain can only think one thought process at a time. So if your brain is thinking, I'm saving something for myself, you're not going to do as good of a job from a team. The leadership will call that out. If Sepp finished on Roglic's wheel, for sure the leadership would have called that out. So I don't see Dumoulin saving some each day and staying close in GC in case Roglic has a problem. I think that it's all in for Roglic. Again, the science says that Roglic's the best guy. He's the best guy, hands down. It's going to be all hands on deck for him. And if he crashes out or he gets sick,
they all go down. That's how it is. It's how it has to be. And then on the flip side, when he wins, they all win. So if you want to get that big high, you have to be willing to accept the super low lows. You got to go all into both. So that's how I see it.
All right, so there you have it. That's the wrap up of the Criterium Dauphiné and some predictions for the Tour de France. Do you have anything else you want to add to this podcast, Tom?
Well, I mean, I have a lot I want to add to this podcast, but I think that's enough. I think it's been an exciting season so far. It's very cool that there's so much racing, but I will say that it's a little bit different in the sense that because the races are all crammed together, it's just the same riders. We see the same riders every weekend getting the results. Completely different races. So one of the things that made cycling so exciting in the past was that the monuments were spread out, that the Grand Tours were spread out. Everyone had their specific focus. And now you can see how many of these skills these riders have to do all types of riding and all types of racing. We're seeing a lot of the same riders in the front of Milan San Remo as we're seeing in Lombardia, which is crazy, right? So you would never see that before. So we're seeing that. We're seeing riders that are performing well in smaller stage races, winning one-day races. So it's different for sure, but it's less exciting in the sense that it's super predictable. But it is very exciting, entertaining to have a new race to look forward to every weekend. But I think that, the older version was better for an overall more exciting season. I think that the Tour de France, because it's crammed into these last races, we're going to see a lot of the same people that have been performing well at these last races, performing well at the Tour. And we'll see the racers that have not raced yet, we'll see them performing well in the Giro after. Some of the racers that we've seen doing some of the one-day classics, they only have 1 month to go to the Giro. So,
and for all the listeners out there, if you guys want to gain a further understanding, a deeper understanding of all this stuff we're talking about, you definitely have to go and check out Tom's book, Tom and Courtney's book called Cycling on Form. Tom, you talk so much about everything we just talked about in that book. Cadence changes, body positions. Tell them why they got to get the book, Tom.
I hate promoting my stuff, but yeah, the book basically breaks down the sport of cycling into all the different components and what I believe the 4 pillars of form are. So we hear people talk about form and building form, creating form, maintaining form, and I believe there's 4 pillars to it. So fitness, which is your zones, your efficiency of the zones, and I break down in the book what those zones are, how to find your zones, how to train them, and how they correlate to specific things in cycling, like time trialing, climbing, attacking, breakaway riding, sprinting, classics, all these things. We also talk about rider type. So that's in that fitness pillar. We're talking about how each rider type uses the zones of fitness differently. Another pillar of form is execution. So that's skills and strategy. So that was really what we talked a lot about here. Different techniques, different skill sets, and different mindsets, different strategies that were used in these stages. The next pillar is what I just mentioned, mindset. So that's your focus. And that basically talks about, in the book, we really go into detail how you can set up your mind to drive your body. Looking at the mind as the driver of your body, which is the race car. The mind is the pilot and the body is the race car. A lot of people just think about cycling and sport as just performance, but you have to learn how to perform and make it a process. So we talk about how you can create your own process and how to use your mind to drive your body. And the last pillar is nutrition. Beautiful pillar. Everybody talks about it. Not that many people actually implement it. It's very key that your nutrition is built around what you're doing. So built around your fitness, built around your rider type, built around the events that you do.
And we give away our system we call 3 Sigma. So looking at the purpose, composition, and timing, how to find those 3 Sigmas and how to apply them to your cycling. So definitely check out the book. It's been out for just a little bit of time and been definitely getting some positive feedback. So that's exciting for Courtney and I. We spent quite some time creating it. And honestly, like, it's all from scratch. It's basically all my experiences when I was racing. I work with the best racers. I worked with the best coaches, the best sports scientists. And there was a lot of things that I learned along the way that weren't taught to me. So a lot of the things that are in cycling right now that people are, using for training don't work. And a lot of the things that do work are things that aren't being taught because no one truly understands it. So I had the unique opportunity of racing at the highest level, but then getting my butt kicked, really. I mean, I had a crazy VO2 max. I had a crazy talent, and I didn't make good on that. I had results. I did well, but I made a lot of mistakes. I got my butt kicked in a lot of areas that I shouldn't have. So when I stopped racing, I started teaching people. I started coaching people, and I realized, like, oh my gosh, you guys are doing the same thing as me. I need to build a process to teach you how to not make the same mistakes that I did. And I need to, and I'm able to, I am really able to identify these things because I personally got my butt kicked from them. Nobody ever taught me how to climb. Nobody ever taught me how to sprint. No one ever taught me how to position. No one ever taught me how to time trial. No one ever taught me how to attack and how to counter. And no one even showed me that there could be offense and defense in cycling. No one taught me about positions and rider type. All these things, I had no idea, and I was out there, and I'm like, well, how do I win? Why am I not winning? What's happening? And all the coaches and all the people say, oh, you need to raise your threshold. You need to lose weight. Those are like the 2 things. That's it. Like, just lose weight, raise your. Well, I did those. I had a crazy threshold, and I was really light. I still didn't win all the time. So, like, why was I not winning? Well, this book is all the things. And my philosophy is, like, why should just the pros do this? Like, the sport of cycling, Tour de France, really only a select few of people really do it and enjoy it. And I found through coaching that people all want to do it. And you don't have to race to be a badass. You don't have to race to want to master cycling. So this book is all about cycling mastery and becoming that black belt of the sport. And that's how we coach here at Cinch, is really helping people master the sport of cycling in the context that they live. It's awesome. And I hope you guys check it out. I think you'll like it. It's fun. It was a lot of fun to write. I think it'll be even more fun to
get the
do.
Book, people.
Awesome.
All right, T-Man. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, awesome job, Zach. We can't wait for the next one. We're going to try to do these every week, so stay tuned for the next one next week, where we'll hash out some more stuff that's happening in the pro cycling world. All right, guys.
Let us know if you guys want us to break down anything in specific. Send Tom a DM on Instagram. Send me a DM on Instagram, and I don't see why we can't cover it.
Yeah, and if you're not on Instagram, just go to our website, www.cinchcycling.cc, and send us a message there, and we'll cover your topic in one of the podcasts. So we're always looking for topics and feedback.
All right, guys. See you later.
All right. Thanks, guys. It's Tom, Zach, the process with Cinch Cycling. Later.